Welcome to Telifox. Today we're going to be teaching you how to set up a domain controller inside of Ubuntu. So let's begin. The first process, we want to update. So we use sudo apt update. Alright, now that everything is updated, what we want to do is go ahead and add the domain controller services. We need to go ahead and install the Kerberos and Samba services. So the following command will be in the description. We're going to type that up and install those services. Once we have this command typed up, we want to go ahead and press enter to start the installation process. The first thing that we need to configure is the fully qualified domain name. So for our case example, it will be in all uppercases, and it will be Telifox corp.local. So Telifox corp.local. Then we want to go ahead and click on OK. Please note that the fully qualified domain name should be in all capital letters. Next, we will add the computer name along with the fully qualified domain name. So for our case scenario, that will consist of all lowercase letters. It will be domain controller 1.telifox corp.local. And then we want to go ahead and press OK. The administrative realm will also be the same thing. It will be the computer name dot the fully qualified domain name. So for our case scenario, once again, it's going to be domain controller 1.telifox corp.local. And then we want to go ahead and press OK. Please note that this installation process will take some time, probably 1 to 5 minutes, depending on the speed of your computer. Now that the installation process is completed, we want to change our IP to a static IP for this server. So we go into settings, and we will be changing the network configuration for this server. So generally what I like to do is I like to ping a specific IP address that is empty on the network, and then we would assign that static IP to the server. So we do that, we need to install some net tools first, so we'll do ifconfig, and it looks like we need to install the tool. So we do sudo install net tools. This may take about 1 minute. Now that that is completed, what we want to do is ping a specific IP address. So for my scheme, I got to 10.0.0.45, and 10.0.0.45 should be available. So it looks like the destination host is unreachable, which means that this IP address is not assigned yet on this network. So we will use this one. We go back into the settings, we go to network. We click on the little cog wheel to change the settings. We go first to IP version 6 and disable that. Then we go to IP version 4, we select manual, and then we want to type in the following information that reflects your network. From there, we add the gateway as well. For my subnet mask, we have probably 3,000 devices that we could put on this net mask. That means that the company or this specific network could grow. So if there's more people that are hired, your business could constantly expand by using a specific IP scheme. Once that's completed, we want to go ahead and click on apply. Then we want to turn off the wired connection and then turn it back on. And it should be picking up the new IP address. There you go, it's static. Very good. Next, we need to edit the host file. You could do that by typing in the following command: sudo nano and then the following password. From here, we want to add our IP address of our server along with the name of the actual computer. So for our example, we enter in the static IP of the server, which is 10.0.0.45. Then we want to add the fully qualified domain name. So that was domain controllers1 controller1 dot Telifox corp dot local. And then we want to add also the computer name, which was domain controller1. Then we save by clicking Control X, Y for accepting the changes, and then enter to save the file. Now we want to change the directories to focus on the etc/samba folder. So we do that by typing in the following command: cd for change directory, then the pathway, which will be in the description of the video. Now we're in the pathway. Now we want to move the following file. So we want to move for mv and then smb.conf and then rename it something new. So I'm going to rename it samba.conf.install. And then we want to press enter. Alright, so we do have to use sudo permissions to execute this specific task. So we do sudo and then the actual command. Now we want to edit the samba-tool domain provision. Then we want to type in the following command: sudo samba-tool domain provision. For the first entry, we want to enter in the realm, which will be the fully qualified domain name of this specific server. For our case scenario, we used the following fully qualified domain name, which was Telifox corp.local. So we press enter, and then here we want to change the domain to reflect the following configuration settings. The domain could remain default, so we could press enter. And then the next few selections and configuration questions we could leave as default and basically just press enter. Next is server role. So this is either a DC, a member, or standalone. Of course, this server role is going to be a domain controller. As you can see right here, we leave as default, so we press enter. Next, we want to see the DNS backend binding. So we leave that default and go press enter. The next question is asking us the DNS forwarder IP address. We do have our own DNS servers that we built in the first few sessions, so we could use those as an alternative. But for my case scenario, we will be using Google. So that's 8.8.8.8. Press enter. And then here you want to enter a strong administrator password for your domain controller. Typically, I like to use at least a 12-character password with a lowercase, uppercase letter, one number, and one special character. After that, the configuration process will start. This usually takes about 1 to 10 minutes. Alright, so as we can see, the server role is an Active Directory domain controller. The host name is domain controller 1. Then we have the Telifox Corp as the net BIOS for Windows. And then the DNS domain, which is the Telifox.corp.local. Now we want to move the Samba Kerberos configuration file to a different location. So what we want to do is open up a new terminal. Then we want to run the following command: sudo cp for copy, and then the following pathway will be all in the description of the video. And then we go ahead and press enter. Now we want to restart the server by typing in the following command. So now we want to type up sudo systemctl, and we want to disable the following services. So we add disable, we do -- for now, and then the following services, which are linked in the description. Now we want to unmask the Samba service, so we can do that by typing in the following command: systemctl unmask samba-add-dc.service. Then you want to press enter. And of course, you will have to enter in your password for this specific device to have that ran. Now we want to enter in the following command to enable the Samba DC service. So it's systemctl enable -- now samba-add-dc.service. Then you want to press enter. Then you want to type in the following command to show the domain level of your server. So you type in samba-tool domain level show. And as you can see, we have a domain and forced function level for a domain. The domain controller is named Telifox Corp. The DC or domain controller equals local, which so in combination would be the fully qualified domain name of telifoxcorp.local. Then you have the force functioning as a Windows 2008 R2 server, and the domain function level as a Windows 2008 R2 domain controller. So it looks like everything is configured properly. We're going to go ahead and test out a few things after this. Next, we want to go ahead and list the contents of the following folder. And what we want to do is we want to remove the resolve.conf link file, and then we want to add our own resolve.conf file so that way we could add our server domain controller information. We type in the following command to remove, or rm for remove. Of course, we have to add sudo in front if you're not in root, and then the following pathway. Next, we want to go ahead and create our own resolve.conf file and add the specific criteria that matches up with our domain controller. So we type in the following command. It's sudo nano and then the following pathway. Then we press enter. Then we just add the following entry: name server, and then the local IP address or local loopback, which is 127.0.0.1. Then we want to save the file with Control X, Y for yes, and then enter. Alright, so the server should be up and running properly. It should be fully compatible. Now you could basically have a Windows Professional computer and add it to your domain controller, so that way you have the proper credentials centralized in one server. Now we could add the Windows computer to the domain controller. What we want to do is open up the network settings inside of Windows, and we want to change the adapter settings. We double click on the Ethernet connector, click on properties, turn off the version IPv6 protocol, and double click on the Internet Protocol version 4 option. We leave the IP as automatic, but we will change the DNS server to 10.0.0.45 to reflect the domain controller. Click OK. Click OK. And as you can see, we still have the internet. So from here, we want to pull up control panel. Or alternatively, we could get to the same setting using the following pathway. So if we click on a folder and right click on this computer and we click on properties, we can now change the computer name and join a domain. So from here, once we pull up the system properties information, we want to click on computer name, and then we want to click on change or rename this group. Instead of adding it to a work group, we add it to a domain. Then you want to type in the domain that you created on your Ubuntu server. For our case scenario, that was Telifox.corp.local. Now we want to enter in the administrator username. And then enter in the administrator password to join. This process works exactly the same on most Windows devices. So as you can see, we have our Ubuntu server here. This is our actual domain controller built on the Ubuntu system, still up and running. And we now have joined the Telifox.corp.local domain on the Windows system. You click OK. And then you want to restart your computer. So we will restart this computer now. Now we could enter the domain for the first time. And what we want to do is go ahead and type in the following pathway. Telifox Corp / then administrator, which is the username. We didn't create any other usernames for the domain controller, so right now it's only the administrator that we have. And then we enter the password. And voila, now you're connected to the Telifox.corp.local domain that you set up using your Ubuntu server. Now the reason why setting up Ubuntu domain controllers is very valuable is that it emulates a 2008 Windows Active Directory without having to pay the price of a license from the Windows server. So it definitely reduced cost when you're running a small business and you have an active directory or domain controller that you were able to set up basically for free, other than the cost of the hardware. So let's how to connect a Windows computer to a Ubuntu domain controller. Next, we will teach you how to connect a Linux system to an Ubuntu Linux domain controller. Now we want to enter in the uncomplicated firewall for this domain controller. So we enter in the following command: sudo apt install UFW for uncomplicated firewall. Alright, it looks like we already have it installed. Now we want to do sudo apt UFW, and I think it's status. Let's see. So sudo UFW status, the firewall is currently not enabled. So what we want to do is enable the firewall with the following command: sudo UFW enable. Now we want to do sudo UFW allow 53 for the DNS server. And then we want to do sudo ufw allow 135 for the domain controller. For clients to verify the domain controller on the client and server side. And then we want to look at the status one more time. Sudo ufw status. And as you can see, we have ports 53 and 135 open for the clients. Go ahead and close that. Alright, so the easiest way to get an Ubuntu device connected to an Ubuntu domain controller is by doing the following. Uploading the installation tool, clicking on Try Ubuntu, and then we want to change the DNS server to reflect the domain controller. Once we're in Ubuntu, we want to click on Settings. We want to change the display settings to represent the proper resolution of the screen. Keep changes. Then we want to go to Network and change the DNS configuration. So inside the network, we want to turn off IPv version 6. We want the IPv4 to be automatically obtained through a DHCP server. Then we want to uncheck DNS to be automatic and change it to 10.0.0.45. Click on Apply. Then we want to turn off the connection and then turn back on the connection. And as you can see, it's picking up a proper internet connection. Then we want to click on Install Ubuntu. We will select the default settings. Once we get to this screen where we create a username, we want to make sure that we select Active Directory. So I'll show you how to do that. You go ahead and add your username. Then you will name the computer. For my case scenario, it's Ubuntu desktop number 2. Username is James. And then we got the basic password for this user. Click on Login Automatically, and then click on Use Active Directory. From here, we want to go ahead and enter in the domain credentials. So for our case scenario, that was Telifox Corp.local. Go ahead and click on Test Connection just to make sure that it's working. After testing the domain connection, we want to enter in the administrator name and the administrator password and click Continue. And this should automatically join the Ubuntu desktop to the domain controller. Now we want to do a few more things before we call this project completed. We want to scan the domain controller for any vulnerabilities. So we enter in the following command: sudo nmap ssa script, and then the IP address of the domain controller. Then we press enter. After we scan the network for that device, so in this instance we don't have to patch this domain controller with any security updates. Now we want to add a user. So the following command, we could add a new user. It has to be a separate name than the existing username in the account, so we'll use bond. So we'll do sudo samba-tool user create bond. Now we will create a new password for that user. And there we go. We have a new user created under the name of Bond with a password that reflects the password policies of the network. So that's how you set up a domain controller using Ubuntu and various operating systems to connect to the Ubuntu domain controller. If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to leave a comment in the section below. And if you need any consulting needs, don't hesitate to contact Telifox today. You have a good afternoon.